Chapter 4. Out to Sea. By the time Robinson had been on the island for 4 years, all his clothes were worn out, and he barely had anything resembling a hat. He needed clothes, though, because without them, the hot sun would burn his skin, and he was afraid of getting sunstroke. He had kept all the skins of the goats, rabbits, and foxes he had killed. After many attempts, he finally made a hat and coat from goatskin, along with a pair of shorts. He left the fur on the outside, so it would shed the rain. His hat was tall with a sharp point at the top and a flap to cover his neck. He also managed to make an umbrella from the skins that could open and close. Although his clothes, umbrella, and especially his hat weren't very fashionable, they were practical, and he could now go out in any weather. The next 5 years were peaceful, with Robinson spending most of his time hunting for food, planting and harvesting crops, and curing his raisins. However, towards the end of that time, he tried again to build a boat. This time, it was much smaller than the first one, and though it took nearly 2 years to finish, he finally got it into the sea. It wasn't big enough for a journey to the distant land he had seen, but he used it to sail around the shores of his island and to fish. He attached a small mast with a sail made from a piece of the old ship's sail and used a paddle to steer. The boat sailed quite well. He even fixed a large umbrella over the stern to keep the sun off like a canopy. One day, eager to explore the island, Robinson loaded the boat with food, took his gun, and set off. Everything went well until he reached the east end of the island, where a stretch of rocks and a sandbank jutted out into the sea for about 8 or 9 miles. Robinson didn't want to risk sailing too far in such a small boat, so he ran the boat ashore and climbed a hill to get a better view of the rocks and shoals. From the hill, he saw that a strong current was flowing past the sandbank, which was just visible above the water, and was breaking the waves. He thought he could avoid the breakers by steering into an eddy that would swing him safely around the point. However, for the next 2 days, strong winds blew against the current, making the sea too rough for such a small boat, so Robinson stayed on shore. On the 3rd day, the weather calmed, and he set off again. But as he came near the sandbank, he found himself in deep water, with a current sweeping the boat farther and farther from the island, no matter how hard he paddled. There was no wind, so the sail was useless. He felt hopeless, and no matter how hard he paddled, the boat only drifted further away. The island became smaller and smaller, and Robinson grew exhausted. He gave up paddling and let the boat drift. Just then, a faint breeze brushed his cheek, and Robinson quickly raised the sail. A stronger breeze soon followed, carrying him past a dangerous reef of rocks. The current seemed to change, and he found himself being carried back toward the island. With renewed hope, he paddled as much as he could to help the sail. Robinson felt like a man who had been told he would die, only to be freed. He could almost have cried with joy. For hours, he sailed steadily, getting closer to the island. By evening, he finally reached shore, but it was on the opposite side of the point he had tried to sail around in the morning. He pulled the boat ashore in a little cove, made sure it was secured so the tide wouldn't carry it away, and lay down among the trees, exhausted from the day's hard work. The next morning, he got back into the boat and sailed along the shore until he found a bay with a small river flowing into it. This was an excellent spot to leave the boat, so he did, and went on foot. Soon, he realized he wasn't far from a place he had visited before, and by afternoon, he arrived at the hut he called his country house. He climbed over the fence with the ladder, as usual, pulling it up after him. Then he lay down to rest in the shade, still very tired from the day before. Before long, he fell asleep. But to his surprise, he was soon awakened by a voice calling, "Robin, Robin Crusoe, where are you?" At first, he thought he was dreaming, but the voice kept calling, "Where are you, Robin?" He jumped up, trembling with both fear and wonder, for it had been so long since he had heard any voice other than his own that he thought it might be something supernatural. But as soon as he stood up, he saw sitting on a tree near him his parrot, which must have flown all the way from Robinson's other house. The bird was calling out excitedly to its master, and Robinson hardly knew whether to be relieved or disappointed to realize it was only the bird that had been calling him. For about a year after this, Robinson stayed on his side of the island, spending most of his time working on the land and making dishes and pots from clay. He had now learned how to burn the clay properly. He also made pipes, which were a great comfort to him, as he had learned how to cure good tobacco from the wild plants that grew around the island. Fearing his gunpowder might run out, he thought about ways to trap goats for food instead of hunting them. After many trials, he found the best method was to dig holes and cover them with branches and leaves, sprinkling dirt on top so that anything heavy passing over would fall in. By using this method, he caught many goats and he tamed the kids, so that before long he had quite a large herd. He kept them in various small fields, which he surrounded with fences from time to time.